Prime Minister said paying his carbon tax is more important than buying groceries or paying rent.
Let's go, John.
He obviously believes that feeding his obese bureaucracy is more important than Canadians feeding their family. Documents reveal just to administer the carbon tax will cost Canadians more than $800 million by 2030, an increase of 163%. This is at a time when more than 2 million Canadians were forced to a food bank in a single month. If the Prime Minister really believes that Canadians, it's more important to pay the carbon tax than feed their families, call a carbon tax now, and let's find out.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, every time the Conservative Party of Canada talks about the issue of climate change, they talk about how it's costing Canadians, just for the month of July and August of this year, $7 billion in climate damages, Mr. Speaker. A record, and the year is not yet over. They may have decided to let Canadians down and let the planet burn, but on this side of the House, we're here for Canadians, we're here to fight climate change, and we're here to build the economy of the 21st century.
Nah, you're here to friggin' tax people, man.
The Honourable Member for Foote.
Come on.
The documents reveal just as much pain that the carbon tax inflicts on Canadians. They will be paying more than $800 million just to administer the carbon tax. Not only have the costs skyrocketed, but the number of bureaucrats just to manage this scam has doubled. Let's put that in perspective. Farmers will pay $1 billion in carbon taxes by 2030. So the Prime Minister is putting the family farm at risk just to feed his bloated bureaucracy. If he really feels that Canadian families want to pay the carbon tax over feeding their own kids, call a carbon tax election and let's find out.
The Honourable Minister for Agriculture and Agri-Food.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate my honourable colleague's question, but it's important to note when...
Come on, Colonel Sanders. Sit down, bro.
Canada was empowered, the way they dealt with agriculture was slashed $500 million from Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. They slashed $200 million from the Business Risk Management Program. If that's the track you want to be on, it's a track of destruction, and we are not on that path as a government, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from South Shore St. Margaret's.
The Radical Environment Minister continues to hold financial interest in Cycle Capital, which benefited the most from the billion-dollar Liberal Green Slush Fund. And today, once again, the Liberals are refusing to produce the uncensored documents for the House and the RCMP on the Slush Fund. The Liberal cover-up, the obstruction of justice, has been going on for 6 months. When will the Prime Minister come clean? Send the uncensored documents to the RCMP, and including everything that this corrupt Environment Minister is involved in.
You're going to have to retract those words because you can't say...
Surprise to members. I'm going to ask the Honourable Member from South Shore St. Margaret's to remove that word, which he knows...
Yo, I'm getting the hang of this. I could be a House Speaker.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member to simply...
I'd have to wear pants, though.
I'll withdraw those words that stuffed his pockets with.
I'm going to ask the Honourable Member just to simply withdraw the words, and we will move on.
He stuffed his pockets with the money. I'm sorry, he's not corrupt. He stuffed his pockets.
They muted it. Oh, give me a break. Or the French translation kicked in.
Sorry, the Honourable Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Oh, my
Speaker,
goodness.
the level of disrespect that Conservative members of Parliament are not just showing this place, but are also showing to you is completely unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, we, as of November 8th, have deposited
Karina, shut the hell up.
29,000 pages of documents in regard to this matter. Mr. Speaker, it is only Conservative members of Parliament that are filibustering and obstructing this place. They are not standing on moral. They are not standing on principle. They are simply trying to hold back the good work that we need to do for Canadians. And Mr. Speaker, their disrespectful behavior is just one more example of their inappropriate behavior here in this place. Thank you.
After 9 years, these NDP Liberals aren't worth the cost of housing. In December of 2023, these incompetent Liberals gave the City of Toronto $471 million in the so-called Housing Accelerator. The result? In October of 2024, housing starts versus October of 2023 are down 33%. The only thing this housing accelerator is accelerating is bureaucracy. When will these NDP Liberals get it through their thick heads? We actually need to build houses for Canadians, not bureaucracy.
They won't get it because they're corrupt.
Just like to encourage all members all members can be more judicious in the words that they choose.
Dude, the House Speaker's gonna faint.
Communities.
He's not doing good.
Interesting. Over the course of the last couple of days, the few times the Conservatives have actually shown any interest in the housing file, they've manipulated statistics to try to paint a false picture. Mr. Speaker, if you actually look at the report from CMHC that came out this week, you'll see that housing starts are up this month. They are up this year, and partially due to the investments that we're making directly in communities. What's fascinating, Mr. Speaker, is that member has been banned by his leader from actually advocating for his communities. His constituents have sent him to this House, and his response is to ignore their needs and instead do whatever his leader asks him. That's not representation, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Dufferin, Caledon.
Canadians actually need a minister who will build housing. Despite what he's saying, the facts are very clear. The housing accelerator doesn't accelerate anything but bureaucracy. Here are some stats. Housing starts in Nova Scotia down 54%, October of 2024 to 2023. In Ontario, same period, 35% down. British Columbia, same period, 30% down. Halifax, same period, 75% down. The housing accelerator is a scam. They know it. When will they actually get the houses built that Canadians need?
The honourable minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
In the spirit of many of the conversations that have taken place today, Mr. Speaker, I will not impugn the motivations of any particular member, but I'm reminded of a famous quote attributed to former British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli, who supposedly had said there are three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics. The statistics that he is using right now dramatically misrepresent the situation. This year, compared to last year, my home province of Nova Scotia is up 23%. This year, compared to last year, the city of Halifax is on pace to build more homes than it ever has in our history. Mr. Speaker, the plan is...
Look at Randy laughing, all excited. Randy's our favorite Indigenous MP.
Again, I'm going to invite all members. Today has been a particularly tough day in terms of members.
Yeah, it has.
Which would not.
It's been bananas.
I hope this is just an anomaly for what's going to be happening. And the Speaker will come back to the House later on some of these issues. The honourable member from Lanark, Frontenac, Kingston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last weekend it was reported that David Lavry from Perth, Ontario had been detained by the Taliban in Afghanistan. Mr. Lavry is the hero known as Canadian Dave, who rescued hundreds during the fall of Kabul. After all other Canadian officials had already been evacuated, Canadian Dave and his team stayed on in Kabul to ensure the safe passage of Canadians and others on the final flights out of the country. Now he is in Taliban custody, and we worry for his well-being. What steps is the government taking to bring Dave Lavry home?
The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank my colleague for his very important question. Of course, we're very aware of his case, and I can't give more information due to confidential issues, but what I would like to suggest to him is to work with him to make sure that Mr. Lavry comes back home. We will take every single measures to bring him home. Thank you.
And the action figure of Canada has spoken.
Member from West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast Sea to Sky Country.
Mr. Speaker, today marks 1,000 days since Russia began its unprovoked, illegal, full-scale aggression against Ukraine. Since then, we've seen the heroism and resilience of the Ukrainian people on full display as they face Russia's repeated, brutal, and criminal attacks.
Canada has committed over $4.5 billion to support Ukraine.
Oh, for crying out loud.
Ukraine until its victory. As we mark 1,000 days of this war, can the Minister of National Defence please tell this House what we can do to help Ukraine win?
The Honourable Minister for National Defence.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This is an excellent and a very important question. For 1,000 days, the Ukrainian people have paid a terrible price for brutal Russian aggression. And throughout that time, Canada has been steadfast in our support for Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in the face of Russia's unjustified and illegal invasion. And yes, just yesterday, Mr. Speaker, the supplementary estimates were tabled in this House. And these supplementary estimates contain $763 million in military aid to Ukraine. That's money for munitions, for training, and the tools that Ukrainians desperately require in order to win. Mr. Speaker, this year, unlike last year, I hope that every member of this House can find the courage to support this desperately required funding.
The Honourable Member from Courtenay, Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, mental health care is health care. But the Canadian Mental Health Association tells us over 2.5 million Canadians can't get the help they need while others are forced to use their credit card to get it. The Liberals have let people and families struggling with mental health down. And the Conservatives will cut health care and mental health supports. Canadians will have to pay more or be left behind. When will the Liberals finally make mental health care a true part of Canada's universal health care system so no one has to use a credit card to get the care they need?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, I agree with the member across the way. Mental health is, in fact, health, and that is why, Mr. Speaker, we made sure to put $200 billion worth of agreements with every province and territory in this country where mental health and substance use services were a key principal priority, Mr. Speaker. It's time for the provinces and territories to step up. It's time for them to work with us. That is exactly why we announced yesterday the opening of the Youth Mental Health Fund, $500 million to invest in young Canadians and their mental health. We are here doing the work, Mr. Speaker. We're happy to have the provinces and territories step up with us.
The Honourable Member from Timmins, James Bay.
Remembrance Day is a sacred day. It's the one time we put aside our differences to pay tribute to our veterans. We mourn, we
As he wears a watermelon pin.
pray for the fallen. This past week, the Conservative leader whipped up misinformation and rage for political gain by falsely claiming that prayers have been banned at the cenotaph. So on the one hand, we have the Conservatives who will exploit Remembrance Day.
This guy's a piece of shit.
Services, and on the other hand, we have the Liberals who continue to fail veterans. When will these two tired old parties actually stand up for the men and women who have served our country?
Shrugged over with his hand in his pockets, trying to talk about
the Honourable Minister for National
veterans.
First of all, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for raising this important issue because I think there is no greater obligation for all of us than to express our solemn remembrance and our respect for the service of all members of the Canadian Armed Forces who have sacrificed so much, many of whom have lost their life, and others who chose to serve but survived. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think it is shameful that the opportunity on that particular day to someone to try to score some cheap political points with a deliberate falsehood is, in fact, a real shame.
So I'm going to ask
I'll keep it going.
Member, because he has mentioned a particular member and saying that there was a deliberate falsehood, that is not acceptable. So I'm going to ask the Honourable Minister to withdraw that language for its unparliamentary nature.
Mr. Speaker, I will withdraw the fact that the falsehood was perhaps not deliberate.
Rewarding criminals and turning its back on victims. Bail and house arrest for dangerous criminals is beyond comprehension. The latest discouraging indication of a broken system, the case of a woman who sexually abused and killed an 8-year-old girl who can now have access to children in prison, courtesy of this government, which has passed laws that make life easy for dangerous people. Why does the Liberal government let child killers have contact with kids in prison, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, that's pretty messed up, man.
Mr. Speaker, at no time,
even for Liberals,
at no time will the government allow that type of scenario to occur. My colleague knows full well that the program she referred to has been around since 2001, Mr. Speaker. So all the years under the former Harper government, that program was in existence. The top priority, of course, is the safety of the children, and I have full confidence that the Correctional Service will apply that criterion seriously. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, Donald Trump has doubled down on his plan to deport millions of people. Yesterday, he talked about declaring a national state of emergency to free up the necessary resources. Once again, there's every reason to fear a wave of migrants at our borders. And once again, we get the sense that the criminal trafficking networks are one step ahead of the federal government. The government says they keep saying they're ready for it, that they have a plan. But until we get a peek at it, how are we supposed to take their word for it? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, we clearly share the concerns of all Canadians to make sure the border is safe. This is a commitment we've made from the outset. We've invested significantly in making sure that the CBSA and the RCMP have the funding they need to ensure that the border is indeed safe. Mr. Speaker, good news. The RCMP Commissioner has reaffirmed that they have everything they need to do their job, and we have full confidence in their work. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. That's interesting, Mr. Speaker. As we ponder whether the federal government has enough resources to deal with a wave of migrants and whether the human trafficking networks are one step ahead of them, yesterday the government announced a reduction in hours of operation at 35 border crossings, including 10 in Quebec. So they say that they have all the necessary resources in place, but at the same time, they're cutting hours of operation. This is obviously contradictory and worrisome. Are they aware of the message they're now sending to human traffickers? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, this is precisely why we harmonized our hours of operation with our U.S. counterparts. That will enable us to reassign resources as needed in other places where they're needed, where there's pressures. This is a discussion that's been ongoing for years with the U.S. government. We're working together, and it will also enable us to apply the Safe Third Country Agreement if, for example, the border is closed on one side and not on the other. By harmonizing our hours, we'll be able to send people back to the U.S.